Hi there, I'm Sachi. Although I don't look like it, I was actually born and raised in Japan, nestled between two cultures. I grew up a bit outside the normal box, but always believed there were others like me. Now I'm on a mission to seek out stories of individuals embracing their unique selves. Today, I'm joined by a fellow third culture kid, and we'll delve into our quirky childhoods and more through the unique lens through which we now view the world. It's about breaking molds and cherishing our blended identities. So, Alex.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Thanks for having me.
It's been amazing to just connect with you out of the blue. And did I email you like 3 days ago, maybe?
3, 4, something quite close.
Yeah.
And come along.
Yeah, thank you so much. You never know until you try, right? So I was like, let's see if we can get this going. So yeah, thank you again so much.
There's no harm in asking.
Yeah, right. So we connected because one of my followers said that you had almost exactly the same upbringing as me. And I was intrigued because my whole life I thought like me and my sister were maybe the only ones. Obviously there would be people similar, but didn't think I would find one so close.
Unique snowflakes are not always unique. There's a couple of them around.
Wow, that's beautiful. For our viewers, would you mind giving a self-intro?
Sure. So I'm Alex, and I was born and raised in Japan. I'm probably a lot older than you, so I'm probably the first generation that was in Japan. I come from a background of journalists and expats, where people used to come here for a short bit of time. My parents came here for 3 months and stayed here 33 years. Just a little extension of the original plan. And as a consequence of that, I went through Japanese school here in local schools. I grew up in Kanagawa, Kanagawa is a large prefecture by itself. I live in the nowhere end of Kanagawa, not in the popular nice end of Kanagawa. And I went to local schools. I went to lower school, middle school, and up to high school. And then since then, I've done English education, and I've worked professionally in London as well. And then I've come back to Japan here about 7 years. So in total, I've done sort of almost 20 years in Japan, 20 years out of Japan. It's half and half a mixture. And I look like this, and I do speak Japanese, which no one has guessed on their first try.
I totally feel you on that. We just, like before recording, we're talking about how like people would ask where we're from, and we would just say Ishikawa or Kanagawa. And people are just like, what?
そうじゃなくて、ご出身は神奈川です。生まれは神奈川です。どちらの方、知って意味でしたらオーストラリアとイギリスですけれど、そういう意味ですね。It's a common conversation. Like, they're trying to ask politely where you're from and what background you have, and they just don't know the right vocabulary to get there.
Yeah, right. So your mum is British, and your dad is Australian. And they came to Japan way before my parents came, and you've spent your childhood in Japan and most of your adult life until 7 years ago in
and out. So I've done in and out of Japan. I've always had a connection to Japan. I've come back here on a regular basis. I've had good friends here. I still have good friends here.
Right.
My wife's Japanese as well, so all in all, we've had a strong connection. And I also have 2 siblings. My younger sister and my younger brother, they are with in Australia. And they didn't necessarily maintain the ties. So they sort of went, yeah, Japan, whatever, and moved on. And I've sort of drifted in and out.
Right.
And as a consequence, I'm probably the most bilingual out of the 3 as well.
Interesting. On the other hand, when you were a kid, did you go to England and Australia a lot?
Occasionally. They were, because of with a family of 5, and flights were even more expensive than today. It was not an every year occasion, every couple of years. And then as I grew up, it was like, all right, we can't do everyone, you're going. Okay, all right, I'll go. So there's a couple of trips that I did with myself, probably at the time for a very young age, like 10, 11, I was doing trips by myself.
Wow.
Because my parents was like, well, you got to go see the country and speak some of that English that you've got going. Off you go. Okay.
That's amazing, though. What an opportunity to be able to like explore on your own. I feel like that's quite the confidence boost for your English, as well as like just the fact that you can survive traveling to across the world.
And I think my father was well travelled, so I think that helped. And it was
Right.
like, well, of course you can do this, off you go. There's a little bit of that, sort of like, get on with it. And I do agree with the confidence that being able to speak both two languages, and specifically speaking good English, was very important for the parents.
Right.
And so they went to a lot of lengths to make sure that happened.
Yeah.
And that was also why I didn't go to a Japanese university. They took the stance of, well, we're not paying for a Japanese university, we'll pay for something else. It's like, okay, I've got Australia, I've got England, don't really want to the States. I'll pick the warm country.
I love that you picked the temperature over the education.
Australia has good education.
Yeah, I'm
That's
sure
the
it
selling
does.
point.
Yeah.
But it was one of those. It was yes. It's sort of that sort of a level of choice.
Lovely. I think both our parents were very particular about making sure that our English was, up to snuff and able to communicate with no problems. But I'm interested to hear your childhood in Japan, because I think that's where we cross over quite a lot. And you were telling me that you were also born in like the tin pot town in the middle of nowhere. And I'm just like, please, let's share some childhood stories.
It was the middle of absolute nowhere, and I was the first kid that went through the Japanese education system. International schools were 2.5 hours away one direction, so they were like, not really.
Yeah.
Local will do fine. We're only going to be here for a couple of years. Those were a long couple of years. And so yes, I was the first kid that went through school, and there was lots of challenges because the school didn't know how to handle it.
Yeah.
It's like, what do we do with a white kid?
Right. A white kid who speaks English as well.
English as well. Although I went to a Japanese kindergarten as well, so by the time I'd hit primary school, I did speak Japanese, and I
Right.
was at the same level as everyone else. And so that was fine. And once everyone got over the sort of the whole, speaking dog, it speaks Japanese. What happened here?
Right.
Moment, they sort of got used to it. The interesting parts were when kids move in from out of town. And at the time, the town that I lived in had a booming factory business. So there were people that new factories were being built, old farms and fields were being laid down and turned into housing lots. So we had new kids move in, and they'd kind of like, what is the white kid doing here? And why does he speak Japanese? Why are you so cool with this? What's wrong with you? And they're like, yeah, that's just Alex. Just get over it. And that was almost the moments where strangeness would meet, because they're like, oh, I am strange. And this is a moment where strangeness actually meets.
Right.
And from that point, everyone had kind of gotten used to it.
Right, I see. So basically what I'm hearing is it took obviously the initial like, wait a minute, but then you were accepted in that community of kids.
As a
and,
white kid.
Yeah, and then people would come and they would initially of course have to like, wait, what?
What?
But then they accepted it, and also at this point I feel like they would be like the new kid and you would be like,
I'm the
OG.
local. I'm the local here. I'll tell you where to catch the fish, man.
Right. And you said you're a little bit older than me, but even when I was a kid, I was getting like the whole, everyone knows my full name in the supermarket, like the finger pointing.
Yep.
I guess maybe you didn't get that so much then?
We got it. We were famous. There
right.
was no doubt about that. Everyone knew who we were.
Yeah.
And so, getting into trouble was big trouble because you were instantly identifiable.
Right.
You weren't like, oh, that kid that we see around here. It's like, oh, no, that's Alex.
Right.
Like, yep.
So
And
did you get in trouble quite often then?
I didn't. My younger brother did.
Oh, right.
I try to stay out of the limelight, which is hard when you're like literally the limelight itself.
That is true, yeah.
And we always hit the same thing. I think your mother did as well. My mother also taught English in the local schools and at home. So we were known as a sort of the English speakers. And the other part is that because my father was a journalist, and so we would constantly do interviews with people. And so we'd be bringing around even more stranger foreigners that would want to come and ask questions. And from age probably 6 onwards, I was the master interpreter because my father knew enough Japanese to get rid of the postman, which doesn't require a lot. My mother's Japanese was good, but not communicating level, whereas I spoke the language natively, so it was like, all right, I can speak to the local.
Yeah,
And
right.
so I was always the one doing this. I think at quite a young age I was on like US radio as an interpreter for some famous journalist that was coming in Japan that had visited my father. It's like, radio, weird bunch, but hey, fine. And you later find out saying, okay, national radio.
Wow. Yeah, well, I definitely didn't have any broadcasting of my very terrible English back in the day, but I empathize with the very young interpreter self because my parents were also adequate. My mum learned Japanese talking to people, so she could speak but not read and write. And my dad, he was a house husband because of visa reasons, and he learnt from books. So he could read and write, and he was excellent at kanji, but not so brilliant at speaking at the time. So them two together were like the dream team, basically. But then, hello, eldest child can do everything. Wow, like hallelujah. Yeah, I definitely started helping with their business quite early. And I'm actually really grateful to them for like using me. It was thanks to me having to help them that my Japanese got so good in like a business sense.
My parents, because of their journalist background, spoke a lot in the house. So I picked up a lot of words at a younger age. I think the vocabulary for my age group was stronger than some of the English kids.
Right.
But I'm also quite dyslexic in English, so my spelling was horrible. My mother still comments on like, "You'd write me lovely letters. I have no idea what they say." Because the spelling wasn't there. So I literally learned English through colloquial speaking, and that's where it really came from. Interpreting and things like that, I picked up the words from my father somehow,
Wow.
and it seemed to do okay.
Right. Wow, that's awesome. I feel like you basically had David Attenborough in your house with all the big words and everything.
Yes, and to this day, there's words that I come up with that people are like, where did you learn that? Isn't it a household word?
That's awesome, though. Like, I'm sure my parents tried, and I remember my dad trying to talk about quantum physics to me when I was way too young, and I was just like, okay, Dad, I want to understand, but you've lost me on, like, quantum.
I do remember having very interesting sessions with my parents on debriefing from school.
Oh.
I had learned new things at school in one language, and my parents were like, "Well, what did you learn today?" It's like, there was some sansu, and we did some tashisan, and you'd have to then sort of go, "Oh, you did some maths, and you did some addition today," and you'd have to go through that sort of process to debrief one language to another.
Yeah.
I remember that being very painful, and I now do it now with my daughter in the reverse order. My daughter goes to an international school, and we now do the opposite.
Right.
She tells me what happened in English, and I give her the Japanese words.
Ah.
So I think it's a common way of potentially sort of expanding the language and the horizons, especially when the kids speak one language in one house and adults speak the other language. I think it just has to happen.
Yeah, 100%. That was actually something my parents did as well, where I went to school, all Japanese, of course, and I came home and had to tell my mum 3 things that I learned at school today. And it was...
Regimented.
Yeah, it was difficult because, otherwise kids are lazy. You say, how's school? And you're like, it was fine. And end of conversation.
Yep.
So she was like, okay, and like, what are the 3 things you learned? And I was just like,
Okay.
And that was how I actually started helping her originally because I learned how to write official letters or like business letters in Japanese. I think it was like gonensei maybe. And it was like haikei, kisetsu no aisatsu nani nani, keigu. And I was so proud of myself. And she was like, oh, well, like mommy has to write some letters to her customers. So like, would you like to try? And I was just like, yes, I will totally do that. And that's how it all started. But it definitely started that conversation of like, I don't know how to say this in English, but and they might not know the Japanese at this point. But like I would talk about like how plants are made or something, and they're like, that's photosynthesis, and this is this, and it would just be a really good conversation starter, and obviously like relationship building as well as like bridging the 2 languages as well. So that's definitely something that I think they did right.
I think mine was less science and more politics. It was like, what do you think about the Japanese Prime Minister? And so over time I'd have to sort of attune to news that came in and watch the Japanese news so that I had an opinion and could understand some of the background of what things had happened. And that's, I remember similar conversations like that, like the proper, so what do you think about the current thing du jour? It's like, okay.
Have you asked your daughter about the Prime Minister yet?
I'm not a fan of the current one. No.
Give her a few more years.
Give her a few more years.
Right. That's awesome. Wow. That's really intriguing that like both our parents kind of came to the same conclusion from completely different backgrounds, you know. And I'm so glad that they did, because here we are, completely bilingual. Going back to like just like living in as like the limelight, as you put it, in a Japanese school, I found myself like trying to fit in all the time. And like there was one point where I was like too tall, I was Caucasian, blonde, and I was just like, why is everything about me different? So I would, you know, like kind of slouch my shoulders, try to be like shorter. I had the Japanese haircut, and I didn't feel like isolated, so to speak, but I felt like maybe no one really got it. Like I would talk to my parents and they had like the British background, the British, you know, way of thinking, which didn't really translate into Japanese school. And I would learn things in Japanese school and kind of bring them to my parents, and they would kind of be like, no, that's not how you should be thinking about that. And so I felt very like stuck between two worlds. And I was so happy when my sister came into the picture, because I was like, oh my God, somebody else who gets it or will get it. So
You won't get it yet, but you're going to.
you're going to, whether you like it or not. So I'm interested to hear how you felt growing up.
I think isolation is not the right word. Ostracization is not the right word either. It's somewhere in the mixture of not feeling in place. Something isn't quite right, and the fact that you are different. And I think it's an acknowledgement of being different. And that was normal though. Like I didn't necessarily take that in a good way or a bad way. Like, well, I'm different. Why am I different? Obviously, the blonde hair and the blue eyes kind of do it. There's no way, no escape out of it. And so I do agree. Like it's a slash down. Like, oh, I'm trying to keep a low profile. It's like, what are you going to do? You've got blonde hair, and you're walking around. There's no way you're not going to stick out.
Right.
It doesn't happen. But I did try and keep a low profile.
Right.
And I think when my sister came into the picture, I think she's quite a close age to me. So I didn't have that wow moment, but it was comforting to know that someone was in a similar situation, had a similar background. She seemed to surf it a lot better than I did.
Interesting.
She was more of a popular kid, and I was more of the like, stay out of it. I don't want to like disturb the crowd.
That's so funny. Me too. Like I was the low profile shy kid, and my sister was like the popular one. I wonder if there's a connection there.
I think I sort of paved the way. I was a social experiment, and she was a success case.
Right. We're the guinea pigs.
The guinea pigs, and like the feedback went there, which I think is, you know, as an elder child, I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
But my experience is going somewhere at least.
Right. Right. That's brilliant though. You kind of had like a pretty early like acceptance of the fact that like you're different and like you can't really change that, but like what are you gonna do, kind of.
What are you going to do? As a kid, I do remember having moments where the things that Japanese kids could do were not available to me. And I think that I remember remembering that as a sort of like a pain moment.
No, what's an example of that?
So every boy at some age is like, I want to be a policeman. I want to be a firefighter. And it's like,
Right.
well, can't be one of those. Don't have a visa for that one.
Right.
Kind of like it's an odd way of crushing a dream. I'm like, well, you just can't.
Right. Interesting.
And I think I do remember that as a pain point. Not that I really wanted to be a policeman, but it's sort of like having that option taken away from you permanently at a small age felt a little bit cruel.
Yeah.
And then there was also the reverse, that people didn't understand that was the case. I remember sort of, this is later on, 1820, when I'm back in time, like, oh, we've got a local election. You're going to come and vote, right? It's like, dude, it's like voting. Yeah.
Yep.
Don't even start.
Yeah.
But it's the sort of like, there was, in some places, almost an over-acceptance where, yeah, you're white, but you're one of us, so you can do all the same things, right? Yes, local, I appreciate your thought on that, but your government does not agree with that stance.
Yeah.
Having to carry an identity card at quite a young age, having to get visas as a student. It's one of those things, like, you mean I can't stay in this country unless I'm permitted to?
Yeah.
It was that I think came a little bit later, but it was a similar experience of like, okay, I need to keep a low profile here. Like, don't want to get into trouble because I might be chucked out. And that was quite scary.
Yeah. I definitely had moments too when policemen would ask for my Gaijin Torokusho, now Zairyu card. I'm kind of glad that they changed the name, even though it's still the same thing.
A foreign registration card, like it's like alien registration card.
Yeah, it was just like
thanks,
oh,
pal.
Yeah, exactly.
Really
like,
appreciate that.
And like I actually got fined once for not having it with me. I had to pay 5,000 yen, and I was like, but okay, like
They don't have to carry one, but why do I have to? Why me? Sort of moments.
yeah, and like again with the acceptance, it was like I know it's shikatanai, like I have to, but this is my home. Like why?
Yeah,
There was
why?
definitely like the frustration period.
And to add to that frustration, the biggest one that I had was when I entered into high school. So I went to a competitive local high school that was aimed for university entrances, and they wanted a bunch of forms. It's like we want your some ID, this, that, and the other. And one of them was a Juminhyo. The Juminhyo at the time, you as a foreigner, you couldn't get.
Oh really?
This was the Juminhyo was introduced in 2000 and something in the early 2000s. Prior to that, foreigners, aliens, did not have one because they didn't live here. They were just aliens.
Right.
And the school was like, well, here's a list of things that we need, and one of them is a Juminhyo. Please go get one from your local government. Like, I can't get one. It's like, what do you mean you can't get one? Just go get one. Literally, can't. It's like, it's not possible. Everyone has one. Go get one. You're not listening to me. Cannot get one. Do not exist. Like, oh, but then we can't tick the checkbox. We can't let you in. It's like, what do you mean? I've passed your exams. I've got all the right, everything else. What do you mean I can't enter? And it went up to somewhere in the Kyoiku Inkai, the educational authority within Kanagawa, sort of up the food chain, where someone's like, oh, I still don't know what to do with this. And it moves up to the point where someone with enough sense goes, it's foreign. He doesn't have one.
Yeah.
Just tick the box and move on.
Right.
But it's like this weird 2 weeks of this going up the food chain and back down, where you're like, thanks, I really am foreign, and this is reality. I remember that being very frustrating. It's I live to tell the tale,
Yeah.
but it'd be worrying if someone wasn't up that food chain.
Right.
What
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
happen?
Yeah, that's insane. I'm glad that they changed that system. I don't. Thankfully, I don't have experiences like that. But yeah, thank goodness that you lived to tell the tale and you got an education here. So you went to high school and then actually you went to Australia for university, right? So how was that? Because I still haven't left Japan, and I think I have this like big expectation of when I go to England or when I start living there, I will have this like grand like discovery of like my roots, and like I feel like I need to manage those expectations a little bit. But as someone who did go back to like their roots, so to speak, I know that the definitions there are still a bit
Fuzzy.
fuzzy, but like say like one of your parents' roots. How was that experience for you?
I didn't find it a root-seeking experience. I never saw it as one. I still to this day don't think I'm really Australian, British, or even Japanese.
That was going to be my question down the line.
I'm kind of me, and that's where it ends. I don't like being categorized into particular boxes. Oh, you're Australian, therefore. And it's like, lived there 7 years, not really. Got a passport, not really Australian. Oh, you must be British then. It's like, lived there 10 years, maybe. Yeah, I like London. That's where it ends.
Right.
The Japanese, like, can't vote. Haven't got a visa, so don't know about that one. So it's sort of nowhere. The experience itself was liberating in many ways, though. Because I went to Australia, I finished Japanese high school, and I wanted to get an Australian education as an Australian. And so rather than taking the foreign student route, I actually redid the last year of high school. And so, and I did sort of, in Japan, it would be a Daiken or some kind of exactly entrance. In Australia, at the time, it was you went to a TAFE, which is a sort of a school that teaches adult students that want to re-enter university.
Right.
You need effectively the last year of high school's marks and essays and all the kind of coursework that goes with it to get a score out of it, and that score gains you entry into university.
Right.
So I went through that process. So in Japan, it'd be like going to a Yobiko or one of those who would be doing the entrance exams. And I did that for a year. And I met a lot of... that year was quite lonely, actually, because I hadn't made a lot of friends. I know very few people in the same situation that I was. The group of people that I was studying with were much older, mature students that were coming in, or dropouts from high school that were trying to redo the end of it. Whereas I'd come from a prim Japanese education, which my maths was way beyond what the Australian entry-level university was teaching. If I could figure out what the problem was and read the questions, I was fine. And so there was a difference there. And so that year was quite painful of acclimatizing to only speaking English and to not stick out.
Right.
No one cared anymore. I couldn't just stand there and expect someone to come and talk to me because I was different. I had to initiate the conversations. I had to go talk to people. I had to do things. There was no special circumstances because I was white. Everyone else is white too, so get on with it was the message.
Right.
And so that was, I wouldn't call it painful, but an experience of learning. And then once I got into university, then I had suddenly met people from all sorts of backgrounds and different places. And then I made a lot more friends, and I've got friends from that period that I still speak to now. And that was a very different experience.
For example, my trip to Italy and like America later on, I found it thrilling that I didn't stand out anymore, and the fact that I could just blend into the background. How was your
Yes, I think it's liberating for the first couple of months, I found. And then it was like, well, why doesn't it talk to me? I have to suddenly pay the cost to talk to someone.
Right.
And I like the anonymity a lot. And I was like, oh, I could just sit here and no one's going to talk to me. But then when you want to actually get something done, it's like, oh, I have to go talk to someone. I mean, they're not going to just recognize me and come up, are they?
Right.
And that story. And then the moment that you then started talking to someone, it's like, oh, you're the Japanese kid. And it's like, don't like that categorization. But that, I guess that's what the thing that stands out to you right now.
Right.
And then the other thing that I found was that there was, as I started meeting people from a similar age group, I sincerely liked culture. I didn't know The Simpsons. I couldn't quote Simpsons backwards, whereas all my geeky mates seemed to be able to. And so I did watch a lot of Simpsons, for instance, and that was cultural acclimatization, where I had a lot of culture from Japan that I was bringing in. But to connect with people of a similar age group, I needed to bring something that they knew as well. We needed a common ground. And as university studies progressed, there was academia that we could connect on. But in the first year or two, as that period came up, I remember reading, there was a lot of radio that I listened to, just because it was easy to listen to something that's coming in. It gave me background information of what's going on. There was popular songs at the time that people were talking about. That was information. I wasn't a very fast reader at the time, so reading was mostly spent on studying. So it was oral stuff that came in. And then, sort of cartoons and sort of popular culture at the time that I tried to stimulate as much as possible.
That was university, and I thank you for sharing. I'm interested because you said you went to Australia, then you went to London to work for 10 years, and then you ended up choosing to come back to Japan. Now, why was that?
Well, the Sydney to London experience was, at the time, Australia was exporting rocks, mineral, plutonium, and people. And I was in the people category of exports.
Right.
I work in the tech industry, and I'm a technologist by trade. And at the time, there was not a lot of tech jobs in Australia. And that meant that the good technologists just went elsewhere. At the time when I was finishing up university, there was a cohort of people that were going to places like Microsoft and Google, which were both based in Dublin. And London was where Working Holiday Australian students went as well. So there was there's a group of professionals who were working in Australia, from Australia, working in London. And a lot of people had background roots in London as well. And so I followed that trail, like, all right, seems like a good place to go. And my parents had, before they moved to Japan, lived in London as well. So I had connections there as well.
Right.
And so I'd followed that set of connections. And I went there for a short period of time from holiday after just at university finished. And some friends that I had sort of connected that I vaguely knew in Australia that I met up in London sort of said, do you want to come and work here? And I'm like, you get a job. I'm like, I'd go find you a job. And it was that casual conversation that sort of led me to a job in London. And I quickly packed up shop in Australia and moved to London. And I was there for 10 years or so professionally for a while. I did a stint in Japan being sent out by one of the companies that I worked for, and then went back as well. And finally, we moved to Japan after I got married, and we had kids.
Right.
Kid, singular. And my deal with my wife was that if we were to have kids, she wanted parental support, so we would come back to Japan for a couple of years.
I see.
And so we came back close to about 7 years ago now. We came back here, and we were going to be here for a couple of years and then move to the next place. And since it's been Brexit, COVID. So the last 4 years have been like, move, shall we not? Maybe. And we've ended up sort of staying.
Right.
And we've now sort of decided that we're going to be here for a couple more years. So let's start settling in.
I see. So you met your wife in England?
we have known each other from Japan from a long time ago.
Oh, right.
So, we've known each other for quite a while. We sort of connected at one point when I was traveling in and out of Japan. As I mentioned earlier, my mother and siblings are in Australia. And so when I was in London, my yearly trip would be to go to Australia through Japan.
I see.
And so I'd buy the flights from London to Sydney and then do a stopover in Japan for a week or so. And I'd sort of meet people here and connect with people here. And so through those connections that I reconnected.
Right. So I don't really like asking these questions, but I get asked a lot, so I'm gonna like I get often asked like, oh, do you prefer like Japanese people over like, Western people romantically? And I'm just like, I think it's like the person, not the nationality. But I was wondering, maybe did you have like preferences because your wife does happen to be Japanese?
Happens to be Japanese, but it's not the only nationality that race that I've dated in the past. And so no, I don't. It's the person.
Right.
I do find it is a different experience to date people in English versus Japanese. I think there is a difference there. I don't know if it's which is comfortable or not comfortable. I don't think there's a huge preference. It's a person. You don't get attracted to like, oh my god, my eyes. Don't tick that way.
Right. Beautiful. I'm glad that was your answer. So you now have a beautiful daughter, and you just mentioned that like you guys have stayed here because of like COVID and Brexit, etc. But did you have like a thought process of like, where should I raise my child? You just mentioned that your wife wanted like parental support here, but surely there must be something like that in Australia or England as well.
Australia was an option as well, but we have a stronger family support, I guess, here, and that was just I wasn't the one bearing the child, I think is what it comes down to.
Right.
And as I wasn't the one bearing the child, I was like, okay, if she says Japan, we'll do that. That's just how it went.
Lovely.
And we did from the very beginning want my daughter to be bilingual. So there was an emphasis on that.
Right.
We were very lucky that we found a nursery that was very close to us that was bilingual. So, right, done. There we go. And then actually, our plan was to move to an English-speaking country before she hit primary school. And the Brexit, COVID situation meant that wasn't going to happen.
Right.
And so we then said, all right, local Japanese school, we do English at the house. Our household language is Japanese. We don't speak English in the house. And I had an experience where I spoke English in the house, Japanese at school. And I felt that was a winning strategy.
Right.
And I'd also met a couple of friends here that are also have a Japanese other halves and have sent kids to local schools, and they found that their kids were a lot more outgoing in the house when they were speaking English, but a lot more quieter and sort of like the same experience that probably you and I had of like just trying to keep out of the limelight in the Japanese schools. And I felt that my youngster is a little bit shy as well. I think putting her to a Japanese school would have probably exacerbated that. Whereas the English-speaking school would probably try and nurture that and push that out a little bit.
Right.
So that was a decision-making process behind that. And so far, she's absolutely loving it.
Beautiful. I'm so happy to hear that. Are you still thinking of maybe moving away in the near future, or do you think she's thriving well enough here?
A fascinating question. I think that's going to come year to year as she survives the year. Like if there's any, we have it in the back pocket as an option, which I think is very important. If there was ever any bullying or any kind of trouble that we see at the school, we've got the option to like, zip, we're going. We can do that, which I think is something that we have as an option, which is available. Would we want to move? That kind of depends on where the world's heading. Like the aim of the game presently is to produce a bilingual individual who can choose for herself. I think the bilingual thing's working, choosing for herself. She's strong-headed enough, she can do it. And so then it's a matter of timing of like, when do we want to expand that horizon?
Right.
Would staying in a school until she was 18 work for her? I don't know yet. Is England the place that we want to move right now with its ties to or its problems with Europe and its connections? Don't know. Is it easy to fly back and forth to Japan right now? With COVID, definitely not. And so until those situations change, we're sort of like, all right, we've got a happy place right now. We've got a happy place right now. We're in a stable stride. Let's keep that going.
Right. I'm curious because I don't have children. As like a parent in Japan with multicultural background, having you been raised here and then the experiences you had versus your daughter's having a 180 degrees, different education, but still in Japan. Crossing those over, like, is there anything that you want to change for her that you had, or like, is there anything that you worry about in her?
I think both the same points. As we mentioned earlier about sort of the isolation, the ostracization, those sort of aspects I'd like to remove, because those were negative experiences. I'd like her to feel part of the community and the society that she's in, which I think international schools at least help on that. And that was a big part of it. I felt that Japanese schools locally may produce that. I think that's down to the individual. Some kids just love it and thrive. But for our particular case, I felt that negative tendency that I had to feel isolated, I think she might have as well. And therefore, that was another part of the choice. I also think that I felt very lonely by the fact that I was the only one. It's me and my sister and my brother. That we were the only unique snowflakes around. And having my daughter in an environment where she was not the unique one, and she had peers that she could connect to, was also another important part. So at the school, when they put up boards, and it's like, let's put out where everyone's from, and you find out that everyone has like at least 2 or 3 roots, because they're American, they're French, they're Russian, they're Chinese, and they all are currently in Japan, and it's like this world map of where people came from had lots and lots of lines in it. And I thought that was fascinating. In Japan, you do that in the same thing, and you have the map of Japan up, and you probably have like 5 prefectures.
Right.
I've moved from the next prefecture. Oh my God, you're from 2 prefectures away. Like that would be the most you'd have. If you had someone from Kansai in Tokyo, it'd be like, well, people don't move around too much.
I'm so glad that she has that, because I am in agreement with you where like it definitely made me a stronger person, I guess, to have certain experiences growing up in rural Japan. But if there was one thing I would have for my own child, it would definitely be like a few more people like myself in the environment. So now in this day and age, I feel like there are more and more of us. So that's why I wanted to ask, because for parents who have not been through the Japanese education, I feel like they're just like full of questions of like, is it going to be okay? Should we move here? Should we move there? And like you said, it depends on the individual, but it's definitely helpful to have more perspectives, especially from the people who went through the education. And I'm only one case, so I'm really happy that you shared that. Thank you.
It's also, on the flip side, me and my wife talk about the experience that we share in common. Because I grew up here, she grew up here, we can also talk about the childhood experience that we both shared. There's pictures and sort of memories of like, oh, that happened at school. Remember that weird thing that they did at school? And those conversations we have. And I do worry somewhat that I am replicating that experience that my parents had, that they didn't understand what the kid was doing. Like, what are they doing at school? What's the concept? Like, we don't share that experience.
Right.
And I feel that I am replicating that experience onto my daughter, that we don't share the same childhood memories in some ways.
Right. That's also food for thought. I think in that sense, maybe the fact that you're emphasizing like being bilingual, she will be able to communicate it a lot easier. There's like a bridge that like you are making sure to build between your daughter and yourself. So yeah, there's definitely the difference in education, but that's not always a bad thing. So
it is true, and we do. Like, me and my daughter do have a very strong connection. That we do. We are the two that go between languages, and she was actually disappointed that you weren't here later in the day. She's currently at school. It's like, Jasmine's coming.
Oh my
I want to meet her.
Oh, bless her. I mean, I would love to meet her too. Maybe I can stick around as long as you guys don't start hating me for you drinking all your tea. This has been amazing though. I'd like to ask you like maybe one last question. I mentioned just now that like there are more of people like us like coming out in the world, and the environment is slowly changing where people are more accepting of foreigners full stop, but also like foreigners who aren't quite foreign or almost Japanese, however you want to put it, just like unique situations. I feel like there are more and more of us coming out and people are being way more accepting of it. However, as like kids growing up in this world of navigating different cultures, I feel like maybe some people could feel like how we felt, as in like, I'm still looking for the word. I don't really want to say isolated, but just, figuring it out. I was wondering maybe if you had any like words or like messages for those kind of kids trying to navigate different cultures, if there is anything that you'd like to mention or share.
I think that the word that you're looking for is Soleikan. Which is not isolation, it's slightly different.
Yeah.
But I think that's the right word.
Yeah.
In terms of messages, it's an interesting one because I think the double side to it. One side is that there is nothing wrong with being a unique snowflake. You know, it's a beautiful thing that you've got an experience that is unique to you, that you are the only person that can do this, and you've got something that is special. And it belongs to you, and no one can take that away. I think at the same time, it's not. You are part of a community. Like it's a loosely connected community that you may even know that doesn't. You may not even know that exists yet. But there are people out there that have had similar or experience that can connect with. There are lots of kids that have grown up in foreign countries. It might not be the same English-Japanese hybrid, but there are kids that have grown up in all sorts of different places, and there is something you can connect with. And I think that's that being able to tap into that later on, and not be sad about the fact that you're the only person. There are more of us out there, and you will meet them. You will eventually find them. So I think, don't keep it up.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you so much. And you've been so generous with your time. Thank you so much again for sharing your story. And I think this is going to help a lot of kids out there too. So
I hope so. It's a unique story, and I think, as I said, it's not the only unique story. And it's if people can connect to it, fantastic.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me.